Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to do this really pretty stitch. Now I've done it in a plain colour as well so you can see it. I'm calling this the bird foot stitch. Look at these little pretty bird feet. And my daughter was looking at this and she says, "Oh look, that looks like a bird has run all over it." And it really does. And on both sides. It's on both sides. It's a fully reversible blanket. Now I did this with a really big hook. I used a UK 8mm crochet hook for this pattern so that I could get it open and light. We're going into from spring into summer and look how pretty this is. And the same with this one. Look how open it is. I'll show you a sample of this done in a smaller stitch in a few minutes. Here, this one here is James C. Brett marble. The number for this one is MT24, and this is how much I've got done with one ball of yarn. It's quite a bit, and I've got 50 stitches on this one. This one's got 50 stitches. I've got two of this one. This colour here, it's like a nice mocha sort of milky coffee colour. It's really pretty. So I'll show you the sample that I made with a smaller hook, and if you keep it with 3 loops at the end, I'll show you how to do it. Remember, it gives you this wonderful straight edge. Look how straight that edge is. It is so straight. You don't even need a border with this blanket. It's straight all around the top, the sides. Your bottom is straight where you've done your foundation chain. That is straight too. A little sample. So this is a sample of it done in that smaller hook. So this is an 8 hook, a UK 8mm hook, and that's what I used to get this pattern, this open pattern. It's really pretty. It's much lighter than this one. This one was a 4. This is a 4mm crochet hook, and it is much denser a stitch. As you can see, look at that, the way you just hold it, and then look at this one, how much softer and open it is. But give it a try. So you can use the smaller hook if you want, and this is the way the pattern comes out, and this is the way it comes out with a bigger hook. Now the chain count for this blanket is an even number, but it's going to be so simple it doesn't really matter. I'll show you when you get to the end of the chain if you've got an extra stitch, just to pick it out, because you're not going to use a lot of stitches for this pattern. So you'll do your chain, and it should be an even number of stitches. Make sure you don't do your chain too tight. And don't worry that mine is looking kind of wide because of this big hook. So what you're going to do is you're going to do one extra chain, and you're going to go into the second stitch in your chain. So we're going to work with loops. Now this pattern is you're going to have 3 loops at the beginning to make your cluster, and only 3 at the end to make your cluster. In between, we're going to be using 4 loops. I'll show you what that is. So we've got 1 loop on our hook, and we're going into the second stitch in the chain. Put your hook through and just pull your yarn through. So now we've got 2 loops on our hook. Go to the next stitch and put your hook through and pull through. So you've got 3 loops. That's your first cluster at the beginning of your row. Put your yarn over and pull through those 3 clusters, and then chain 1. So we've chained 1. Now where that cluster is, Now I know that stitch looks a little bit big, but don't worry about it. You're going back in to that stitch, that same stitch that your cluster's in. Go in there and pull through a loop. So now you've got 2 loops on your hook. Go into the next stitch, pull through a loop, so we've got 3, and go into the next, so you have 4. This is going to make your next cluster. Yarn over and pull through all of those loops, then chain 1. Now into that same stitch that cluster is in, go back into there. So we've got 1 loop on our hook, go in there and pull through. That makes your second stitch, or your second loop. We're going to use the next 2 chains. We're going to use the next 2 stitches in your chain. So yarn through, pull through, you've got 3 loops. Through the next stitch, pull through, you've got 4 loops. Yarn over, pull through those 4 loops and chain 1. Remember and do that chain 1. So into the stitch that you've just used, where your cluster is, go in there, pull through a loop. You've got 2 loops. Into the next stitch, pull through a loop, you've got 3. And the next stitch, you've got 4. Yarn over and pull through, and then do 1 chain, and that locks them together. And you've got all these little clusters in your chain. So remember and go into that stitch again. Once you've done your chain, you're going into that stitch that you've just used. So yarn through and pull it through. You've got 2 loops. Into the next stitch, that's 3 loops. Into the next one, and that's 4. Yarn over, pull through all of those stitches and chain 1. Into that loop again, there, that's your stitch that you've just done, into there. You've got to use that again to keep your stitch count right. So pull through, and then 2 of your stitches from your chain. Yarn over and pull through to make your cluster, chain 1, and you do that all the way to near the end. Pull through, chain 1, just work your way along. Remember and go into that stitch you just used. You're using that stitch twice. And yarn over and pull through and chain 1. Now you should have 1 stitch left. If you've got 2, pick one out. You need 1 stitch here, so we're going into that same stitch again that cluster is in. We've got 2 loops. We only need 3 loops at the end. So into that last stitch, pull a loop through, and we've got 3 loops. Put your yarn over and pull through and chain 1. Now this keeps your edge nice and straight. I found that only doing 3 on the end and at the beginning keeps that edge nice and straight, and you don't need a border. If you use 4, as we have here, these end ones tend to have a big lump sticking up like that at the end all the way up, and it doesn't look nice. So I found that just doing 3 stitches at the beginning and using 3 at the end, it keeps it slightly smaller of a cluster, and it stops it from sticking out at each section like this. It keeps it all nice and straight. So you just remember, at the beginning of your row and at the end of the row, you only have 3 loops on your hook. So we're going to go into that stitch again. We're going to go into this stitch right below the one here, just go through there, it's right where the cluster is, and pull through, and we've got 2 loops. Now go to the next stitch. That's the one that looks like it's got that V and the space in there, that stitch there. Go in there and pull through. Now remember, we're at the beginning, so we've only got 3 stitches on 3 loops. So we're at the beginning and we've only got 3 loops. We're only doing 3 loops at the beginning and 3 loop clusters at the end. So chain 1. Now right down there where that stitch is coming in, that same space, pull through a loop. Then use the next 2 stitches in your work for your next 2 loops. So go through the next stitch and pull through a loop. We've got 3. The next stitch, pull through, we've got 4. Now when you pull your 4th loop through, if you're not in a big space like this, you've done something wrong here, and have a look and see where it's gone wrong. So put your yarn over and pull through those 4 loops and chain 1. So through that loop again, you've got 2 loops on your hook. Then through the next stitch, the top of the next stitch, pull your loop through, and the next one, pull your loop through. You've got 4 loops. You're going to do that all the way to the end. Remember your chain 1, and remember and go back into that same stitch. So we've got 2 loops, then use the next 2 stitches in your work. So through the top of that cluster and then through that space. Yarn over and pull through, chain 1, into that space again, and then use the next 2 stitches. So that's the stitch on top of the cluster and then that next space. Yarn over and pull through, chain 1. Use that space again to get your first loop, then use the next 2 stitches in your work. Go through the top of the next 2 stitches. It should be the one above your cluster. Oops, just push that hook through. This is quite slidey, this yarn. And pull through, and then the next stitch is that kind of long stitch between the clusters. Yarn over and pull through and chain 1. So the stitches you're using is this one you've just used, and then the stitch that's on your cluster, and then that longish stitch that's next, that's a space. That's what makes your 4 loops. The one on your hook, then go into this space again that you've already used, and then the next stitch in your work should be above the cluster. Just push through both parts of that stitch and pull through, and through the next stitch and pull through and do a 1 chain all the way to near the end, and your last one should only be 3 stitches. Pull through, chain 1 into the space again, through the top of the next 2 stitches, pull through, chain 1. So I'm at my last cluster, and remember, your last cluster you're only going to do 3 loops. We've got 1 on the hook, and we're going into this chain space, this space here, the one that we've already used. There's a stitch in there already, and that's the one we're going to use again. You're not going to use the one in the top of the cluster. Go to the side and just go in to the side of that cluster and make your loop. This is what's going to keep that edge nice and straight. Just go into the side of the cluster and pull through, chain 1, and then you're going to turn. And then what you're going to do is you're going to repeat that row again. Repeat that row as many times as you want. So remember, you're going into that first stitch right here, right underneath that loop. So go in to there and pull your first loop through, then into the next stitch. That's your space stitch, and pull through. You'll only have 3 loops at the beginning, remember, and pull through those 3 loops and chain 1. Now you'll start doing your 4 loop clusters. That keeps, as you can see, it keeps the edge nice and straight the way I've showed you. Now if you need to rewind the video, just rewind the video, especially for these edges. So at the edge, you're using the bigger stitch, and then you're going right into the end of the cluster here. Just these 2 last loops of that cluster, and it'll keep your edge nice and straight on your blanket. Everything in between is done with 4 loops. So we're going into that space there again and pull through a loop. And then the next 2 stitches, that one and that one, the one above your cluster and the one where that space is. So go through that stitch, take the 2 parts of that stitch and pull through, and then the next stitch. You've got 4 loops, pull through, chain 1 and use that stitch again. You'll do that all the way along to the end. And that's what you'll repeat row after row after row. Remember, do your chain 1 and remember to use that stitch twice. So go into that stitch again and then through the top of the next 2 stitches. You may just have to help your hook through that cluster stitch, that top one at the cluster. But it makes a really pretty pattern. And it's really nice. It's lovely in this James C. Brett chenille. It's so light, I can't believe it. It's really pretty. And you get your nice straight edge. That'll straighten up that one. Now, if you were to do 4 stitches, that would be poking out really high like that. And when you do your next stitch, you're left with that sticking out if you use 4 loops at the beginning and the end. So do 3 loops. So when you work into that stitch on the way back, it'll straighten it out. It straightens it out and you get a really nice straight. You can see here how straight it's going to go up the sides. I'll show you this blanket here. Look how straight the sides are. They're lovely and straight. I'll show you here. You can see here how straight the edges are in the pattern, and it's a really pretty pattern too. So I've done a few more rows on this sample, and look how pretty it is. It really does come out like little bird feet on there. And give this a try. This is it done in a solid colour, and this is it done with the same size of hook in this marble effect. It is really pretty. Look at this. Please subscribe to the channel. It just gives the channel moral support. And if you click on the bell icon, YouTube will tell you when I put up another tutorial, so you can keep updated with that. So thank you so much for watching. So until the next time, happy crafting, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.